you've spent a lot of time also working in New Guinea, and you made some interesting points about retribution and the approach to settling grievances and matters over there in your time when you worked there. There is, in a sense, in our current society here, a strong move towards retribution, wouldn't you say? Yes. There used to be a thing for rehabilitation, and there still is to some extent, but retribution in some ways has overtaken rehabilitation.
Yes. Look, and that the 5 or 6 principles of criminal punishment, or punishment's the wrong word, their importance shifts regularly. At one point, rehabilitation was all the thing, and then we got the Minister for New South Wales Minister for Justice, what was his name? Jackson, wasn't it?
Rex Jackson.
Rex Jackson, whose behaviour brought that down, and then punishment, retribution became important, and it's always shifting, and hopefully, and as we approach a New South Wales election, of course we always have the auction between the two parties about what they're going to do about it. Build more jails and
allowing for the fact that there are such great differences between the New Guinea and Australian societies, nevertheless, what did you pick up during your time with respect to the retribution aspect over there and how it was exercised, and what lessons can it tell us here?
Well, the retribution thing is, of course, completely nothing to do with official law.
No, of course not, but because it exists.
It exists. Generally speaking, the formal punishments handed out by the courts in New Guinea are miles less than ours are. They recognise, I think, the difficult situation that they've got. They recognise that law and order is a fairly recent thing in New Guinea, particularly in the Highlands. But I never had anything to do with criminal law in New Guinea. I only ever appeared in civil cases and in the Court of Disputed Returns. But I was very impressed, and still am impressed, with what I see of the quality of the courts in New Guinea, bearing in mind the many other problems that the government and the country has. When I say New Guinea, of course, I mean PNG.
Yes, no, I know. But I am also nevertheless interested, and yes, of course, taking into account the fact that, yes, there's a good system there, but I am thinking more about the retributive elements that exist in society. And you were saying just a moment ago, and there are parallels going on at the moment where there are perceptions about inadequate sentences and the like, and as I say, a stronger mood for retribution, which one could argue is being flayed somewhat by tabloids and radio and the like. I suppose I'm asking you, during the course of a very long career, your thoughts, in a sense, about how that can be best tempered, and or if it should be at all, or how best to take things forward. In a sense, I was saying a moment ago about the Minister in New South Wales pandering to two masters. And that is perhaps a perennial when there's an election looming, but all the same, that question of retribution versus justice.
I think one great problem, again, is the media. This habit of the media of interviewing the victims of a crime immediately the sentences have been imposed, I think is an absolute disgrace.
Given the strong emotions they're undoubtedly experiencing, you mean?
Yeah. When I know I'm saying something that probably is would be most unpopular, but from my experience being a member of the Serious Offenders Review Board, at that stage, victim impact statements were fairly new. Apart from allowing the victims to let off steam, I really don't see that victim impact statements have much to do the the appropriate penalty. I would have thought that if a murderer is up for sentence, I wouldn't have thought that the statements by the relatives of the deceased carry much weight. I would have thought it was fairly obvious that they were going to be affected by the loss of their loved one without having to have... and I don't think victim impact statements ever really swung the Serious Offenders Review Board much in either its decisions about whether the prisoner ought to get a determinate sentence or whether he ought to be allowed out on parole.
I would like to ask you, in fact, in light of that...
A lot of people wouldn't agree with what I've just said, I know.
Well, but this is where I suppose, and there's another interesting angle to this. You had the opportunity to work alongside the father of Anita Cobby, who would be in an excellent position to speak from the point of view of being a victim of a most heinous crime back in the 1980s. And I remember I was working in radio in Sydney at that time when it happened. And yet I understand that he, in a sense, believes quite strongly in rehabilitation and in fact wrote to a couple of the murderers, I believe.
He did. Mm-hmm.
So his example, perhaps as a prime victim, if as it were, did that shed some light or have some bearing on your thoughts about this?
Certainly. But he was most... he's dead now. He smoked too much. He was a most remarkable man. And another... nothing to do with his daughter's murderers. But he became quite a mentor to several murderers, one in particular who died of a heart attack at the age of about 40 or 45 or something very early. He gave the eulogy at his funeral, or gave a eulogy at his funeral.
So he believes strongly in rehabilitation?
Yes, he did.
What about you?
Yes, I certainly do. Yes, I do believe in rehabilitation. I think it's probably difficult in relation to minor crime when you haven't got them for long enough, and I think it's most useful when you get a 20 to 25-year-old and keep him in jail for 15 years, by which time he's 40 or something like that. I don't know how much the loss of his the growing age plus what rehabilitation you've been able to give him. I think it's the two add together.
You visited a lot of prisons.
I visited every prison in New South Wales except Broken Hill. Mostly, well, yes.
Do you have thoughts about how they could be improved?
No, I think I'm biased because I've always appeared for the department or assisting the inquiry. I think our prisons are pretty good. I think it's a pity we have to have so many of them.
Some would say that's because there's so many criminals.
That's right.